Nuclear War Survival Skills, Chapter 9, Food Continued, page 89. If any type of fireless cooker is available, the hot cereal only has to be boiled and stirred long enough so that no thin, watery part remains. This usually takes about 5 minutes. Continue to cook, either in the fireless cooker for at least 4 or 5 hours, or by boiling for an additional 15 or 20 minutes. When is it necessary to boil grain meal for many minutes? Minimize sticking and scorching by cooking 1 part of dry meal with at least 4 parts of water. However, cooking a thinner hot cereal has a disadvantage during a food crisis. An increased volume of food must be eaten to satisfy one's energy needs. If grain were the only food available, few Americans doing physical work could eat enough of it to maintain their weight at first, until their digestive tracts enlarged from eating the very bulky foods. This adaptation could take a few months. Small children could not adjust adequately to an all-grain diet. For them, concentrated foods such as fats also are needed to provide enough calories to maintain growth and health. Cooking grain and beans together. When soybeans are being used to supplement the lower quality proteins of grain, and when fuel or pots are in short supply, first grind or pound the beans into a fine meal. To further reduce cooking time, soak the bean meal for a couple of hours, keeping it covered with water as it swells. Next, put the soaked bean meal into a pot containing about 3 times as much water as the combined volume of a mixture of 1 part of dry bean meal and 3 or 4 parts of dry grain meal. Gently boil the bean meal for about 15 minutes, stirring frequently, before adding the grain meal and completing the cooking. Stop boiling and add the grain meal while stirring constantly. Again, bring the pot to a boil, stirring to prevent sticking and scorching, and boil until the meal has swelled enough to have absorbed all the water. After salting, boil the grain bean mush for another 15 minutes or more before eating, or put it in a fireless cooker for at least 4 or 5 hours. Soybeans boiled alone have a taste that most people find objectionable. Also, whole soybeans must be boiled for a couple of hours to soften them sufficiently. But if soybeans are pounded or ground into a fine meal and then 1 part of the soybean meal is boiled with 4 parts of meal made from corn or another grain, the soybeans give a pleasant, sweetish taste to the resulting mush. the unpleasant soybean taste is eliminated. If cooked as described above, soybeans and other beans or dried peas can be made digestible and palatable with minimum cooking. 100% grain and 100% bean diets. A diet consisting solely of wheat, corn, or rice and salt has most of the essential nutrients. The critical deficiencies would be vitamins A, C, and D. Such a grain-based diet can serve adults and older children as their staff of life for months. Table 9.1 shows how less than 1 3/4 pounds of whole wheat or dry yellow corn satisfies most of the essential nutritional requirements of a long-term emergency ration. The nutritional values that are deficient are printed in bold type. To make an easier comparison with the emergency recommendations, also printed in bold type. Food energy is given in kilocalories. The acronym is KCAL, commonly called calories. The acronym is CAL. Expedient ways of supplying the nutrients missing from these rations are described in a following section of this chapter. Other common whole grains would serve as well as wheat and yellow corn. At least 1/6 ounce of salt per day, about 5 grams, is essential for any ration that is to be eaten for more than a few days. But 1/3 ounce, about 10 grams or 3/4 a tablespoon, should be available to allow for increased salt needs and to make grain and beans more palatable. This additional salt would be consumed as needed. To repeat, few Americans at first would be able to eat the 3 or 4 quarts of thick mush that would be necessary with a ration consisting solely of whole kernel wheat or corn. Only healthy Americans determined to survive would be likely to fare well for months on such unaccustomed and monotonous, I can't say that word, monotonous food as an all grain diet. Eating 2 or more different kinds of grain and cooking in different ways would make an all grain diet both more acceptable and more nourishing.
Monotonous.
Here's how you say that word.
Monotonous. Monotonous.
Monotonous. Monotonous. Monotonous. Monotonous.
Monotonous.
Monotonous. It means dull, tedious, and repetitious, lacking in variety and interest. The statistics that he quotes with monotonous regularity. Not many people would be able to eat 27 ounces dry weight before cooking of beans in a day, and fewer yet could eat a daily ration of almost 23 ounces of soybeans. Beans as single food diets are not recommended because their large protein content requires the drinking of more fluids. Roasted peanuts would provide a better single food ration. Grain supplemented with beans. People who live on essentially vegetarian diets eat a little of their higher quality protein food at every meal, along with the grain that is their main source of nutrition. Thus, Mexicans eat some beans along with their corn tortillas, and Chinese eat a little fermented soybean food or a bit of meat or fish with a bowl of rice. Nutritionists have found that grains page 90 are low in some of the essential amino acids that the human body needs to build its proteins. For long-term good health, the essential amino acids must be supplied in the right proportions with each meal by eating some foods with more complete proteins than grains have. Therefore, in a prolonged food crisis, one should strive to eat at every meal at least a little of any higher quality protein foods that are available. These include ordinary beans, soybeans, milk powder, meat, and eggs. Table 9.2 shows that by adding 7 ounces or 200 grams of red beans or other common dried beans to 21.1 ounces, which is also 600 grams, of either whole wheat or yellow corn with salt added, you can produce rations that contain adequate amounts of all the important nutrients except vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin D, and fat. If 5.3 ounces, which is 150 grams of soybeans, are substituted for the red beans, the fat requirement is satisfied. The 600 grams of yellow corn contains enough carotene to enable the body to produce more than half the emergency recommendation of vitamin A. The small deficiencies in riboflavin would not cause sickness. Other abundant grains, such as grain sorghums or barley, may be used instead of the wheat or corn shown in Table 9.2. To produce fairly well-balanced rations, other legumes would serve to supplement grain about as well as red beans. Peanuts are the exception, although higher in energy, fat, than any other unprocessed food. The quality of their protein is not as high as that of other legumes. Expedient ways to supply deficient essential nutrients. Vitamin C. A deficiency of vitamin C, ascorbic acid, causes scurvy. This deadly scourge would be the first nutritional disease to afflict people having only grain and / or beans and lacking the know-how needed to sprout them and produce enough vitamin C. Within only 4 to 6 weeks of eating a ration containing no vitamin C, the first symptom of scurvy would appear. Swollen and bleeding gums. This would be followed by weakness. Then, large bruises, hemorrhages, and wounds that would not heal. Finally, death from hemorrhages and heart failure would result. Scurvy, a condition caused by a severe lack of vitamin C in the diet. People who don't include enough fruits and vegetables in their diet are at risk. It says it's very rare, fewer than 20,000 US cases per year. Treated by a medical professional, requires medical diagnosis. The simplest and least expensive way to make sure that you, your family, and neighbors do not suffer or die post-attack from scurvy is to buy 1 kilogram, which also means 1 million milligrams of pure vitamin C, which is the crystalline ascorbic acid form. Unlike vitamin C tablets, pure vitamin C crystals do not deteriorate. An inexpensive mail order source is Bronson Pharmaceutical, 4526 Renetti Lane, La Canada, California, 91011. Table 9.1. Daily rations of 100% grain, beans, or peanuts. On the first row it says dry wheat. Next to that it says yellow field corn that's dry. Next to that is emergency recommendations. Next to that is dry soybeans. And then it's going to be red beans that are dry. And lastly, it says peanuts that are roasted. On the next row, it says weight. For dry wheat, it says 790 grams or 27.8 ounces. For yellow dry field corn, it says 750 grams or 26.4 ounces of weight. Energy recommendations, it doesn't say anything. For For the weight of dry soybeans, it's 645 grams or 22.7 ounces. The weight for dry red beans is 760 grams or 26.8 ounces. And the weight for roasted peanuts is 447 grams, 15.8 ounces. For energy, kilocalories of protein, something grams. For dry wheat, it's 2,600. Wait, for energy, kilocalories. For dry wheat, it's 2,600. The kilocalorie energy for yellow field corn is 2,600. Same for energy recommendations. Pretty much the whole way down, it's 2,600 kilocalories for all the listed things. For the grams of protein, for dry wheat, it's 103. For yellow field corn, it's 67. The energy recommendations is 55. For soybeans, it's 220. For red dry beans, it's 171. And for peanuts, it's 117. Grams of fat, for dry wheat, it's 15. For yellow field corn, it's 29. Energy recommendations, 30. For soybeans, it's 114. For red beans, it's 11, and for peanuts, it's 218. Calcium mg, 324 for wheat, 165 for corn, 400 for energy recommendations, 1,458 for soybeans, 11 for red dry beans, for magnesium, it's 1,260. For wheat, it's, well, I'm just going to show the thing. I'm going to snap a picture of it. You can read it later. But that's all the shit.